But for now, for more on this, I'm joined by Franak Vyacheokra, a friend of Roman Protasevich and an advisor to exiled opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya. Also with us is Anne Applebaum, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author. She's written extensively about Eastern Europe. Her latest book is called Twilight of Democracy. Welcome, both of you. Franak, let me begin with you because I do want to hear the latest on your friend, Roman Protasevich, and his condition. What have you heard? I don't know if you heard the earlier conversation, but there are reports that his mother is saying that he is in a hospital in Minsk. We have not confirmed that, but that would be an escalatory step. What is your response, and what have you heard?
Yeah. We heard the same information. Mother and father of Roman received information that he is with the problems with heart in one of Minsk hospitals, but we can't prove this information because this information came from doctors or from those in medical circles who saw, or at least who heard, that he was brought to the hospital. It doesn't mean that he is released. He's still under arrest, but I knew that he had some problem with heart, and I am sure that during the detention and during the interrogation, he could be pressed, pushed, and also potentially tortured.
So he did have a heart condition, because that is something that many did not know or were not aware of, and sort of question that headline when they see his age, a young man in his 20s. But he does have a heart condition?
I don't know for sure, but I know that he was always had concerns about his health, and one of his arguments of not returning to Belarus and not being detained by Lukashenko's KGB because he has very weak health, and he was saying that he will not survive if KGB will capture him.
Franak, can you tell us a little bit about Roman and the latest work that he's been doing?
Roman is a young guy, journalist, turned to be activist, very romantic. He always was dreaming to live in Belarus, free and democratic. Since he's 17, he was participating in all the rallies, marches, and during the last 2-3 years, he was managing several very cool media projects on Telegram. He was collecting videos, pictures. He was working with citizen journalists, and the most important, he was always writing very strong texts, inspiring people for non-violent resistance. He always believed that Belarusians must fight for their freedom and democracy, and he supported this non-violent revolution that started last August.
And Anne, you wrote a piece just last year on the social media platform that he works for, the Next Alive. What can you tell us about this site and the work that they are doing?
This was a really unusual and interesting way of conducting opposition demonstrations last summer. Just for those viewers who don't know, the demonstrations happened in the wake of a presidential election that was stolen. The current dictator of Belarus ran a very strange campaign, clearly cheated. And the winner, or at least the person who should have been acknowledged as winning the most votes, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, was eventually forced to flee the country. But there was a series of demonstrations that went on all summer, and one of the ways that the demonstrations were organized was through these Telegram channels. Telegram is an app that can be used to reach people. It can be used to post information, videos, and so on. And Roman, as well as Franak, who we're also speaking to, and others were working with these channels in order to connect people in Belarus. And they were important because they weren't shut down by the government. The government couldn't shut them down, although it would have tried to. They're on people's phones. And people continued to have access to them even when all other forms of communication and media were shut off. And it's really important to stress how creative and how cutting edge the Belarus opposition was, including Roman. How they really used tools of new technology to reach people and bring them together. This is a country that had not had a major mass movement like that before, a major democracy movement. And now you can say, it's a movement that has touched almost everybody, people in all walks of life. It's not just the urban cities. It's not just intellectuals. It's not just educated people. The work of these very young people really brought together the whole country. And of course, that's why the dictator hates Rahman so much, and that's why he made this extraordinary step, bringing down a commercial airliner in order to arrest him.
And how big of a crisis is this for the EU when you have this poor country able to do such a drastic thing where you have an EU-made plane traveling from one EU nation to another EU nation brought down? In terms of what this means for the EU, what kind of a crisis are they in?
It's a really important moment for the EU, precisely because this is, in fact, one of a series of these kinds of events that's happened over the last several years. We've seen Russian secret services murdering Russian dissidents and Russian opposition figures all across Europe, actually, most notably and famously in London and Salisbury. We've seen Iranian and Chinese attempts to assassinate their citizens abroad. This is another form of what some are calling transnational repression. In other words, dictatorships are reaching out across their borders in order to murder or arrest or kidnap their citizens or their exiles or their dissidents. And the repercussions of this is that as we saw today and in the last couple of days, is that increasingly other EU citizens, other people are affected by these attacks, and they create a general sense of lawlessness. If the EU, and by the way, this applies to the United States and it applies to other democracies, if we are not able to control what goes on inside our borders to prevent people from being kidnapped and murdered, and sometimes these are our citizens as well, then slowly the autocracies of the world gain energy, they gain confidence, they gain the belief that they can do this more and more. And so for the EU, it's a really important moment to draw a line to say, this cannot continue. Because other countries are going to be watching what happens here. As I said, the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians, they're all watching to see how the EU reacts to this, because this is a tool that others could eventually use as well.
And global airliners fly over their airspace on a daily basis. And Franak, I know that you were on a flight just last week with Belarusian exiled opposition leader Svetlana Tikhanovskaya on the exact same flight. You happened to get diverted last minute, but she was on our air yesterday and said that this could have happened to her had you not been diverted. This is changing how you consider planning and traveling as well, is it not?
We received information that potential target of the special operation could be Tikhanovskaya, actually, because exactly 1 week ago, Tikhanovskaya was returning from the Delphi Economic Forum in Athens. She was taking the same flight, and I was with her that moment, and we were flying over Belarus. So potentially, we could be in prison right now. Unfortunately, right now, after yesterday's incident, no one can feel safe anymore. After yesterday's incident, Belarus crisis becomes not only a domestic issue, but it becomes a threat to the entire Europe. And this is why European Union, the Western states, must consider broad package of sanctions. And this reaction must be not only the words, but very concrete roadmaps, how to isolate the regime on one hand, but also how to support civil society, because groups such as media, doctors, teachers, students, workers, they continue their fight, but they need technical assistance. They need support now.
And Anne, this isn't just a one-off incident. We can go back many years and look at what these authoritarian regimes, in particular what Vladimir Putin and his aggressions throughout the region and poisoning his opponents on European soil, on European land. And yes, sanctions have been imposed, but clearly not enough to deter him and prevent him from further actions. What should be done now, given that we've seen this transpire for so many years? Should there be tougher sanctions? And by that, I mean going after that Nord Stream pipeline, too.
I would think that before Europe touches the Nord Stream pipeline issue, there will have to be some proven link between this event and the Russian government. And it's very possible that we will get that. I mean, I doubt very much that Lukashenko would have dared to do this if he didn't have Russian backing. And there's already been noises of approval from Moscow for this incident. But I do think that there are, even before we get there, there's some important things to watch for. One is the banning of the Belarusian national airline. We may be hearing more about that in the next couple of days. The other is cutting off all flights to Belarus, another possibility. The EU is beginning to look at much more serious sanctions directed at Belarus than it has done before. But you're right. I mean, if none of these things suffice, if none of them work, then much bigger, much more significant economic actions will eventually have to be taken. Again, it's in the European states' own interest for there not to be murders, for there not to be planes brought down, for there not to be these kinds of incidents within their borders. And we may well see a greater interest, certainly in much bigger, much larger kinds of sanctions, including on the Nord Stream pipeline.
Yeah, and you're right. There's no direct link now or any evidence suggesting that Russia signed off on this or knew of this or was aware of it. But you have to look at what the facts we do know, and it was a Russian-made MiG that forced this plane to land. Just a few hours after this took place, the editor-in-chief of RT posted on Facebook that she had never thought she'd be as jealous as she was of Lukashenko, and congratulated him on his words, on his work. There were similar expressions from other members of the Russian Duma. So whether or not this is something that Vladimir Putin knew of ahead of time, this isn't something that he's condemning.
No, he's not. And it's pretty clear, as I said, Lukashenko has no friends in Europe. He's in, a deeper and deeper economic crisis. His economy is faltering. He may well need military and other kinds of support. It's pretty clear now that the one country he's relying on is Russia. And it is Russia who will prop him up. And by the way, that's another element of the new form of authoritarianism, is that these countries support one another, prop one another up. Russia backs Venezuela. Iran backs China. These are now there's a network of countries who seek to support one another, and for Belarus, the most important one of those is Russia.
And Franak, for our viewers around the world, both in the U.S. and in Europe and Asia, when you see something like this take place, what is your message to them? They may say, I'm not an opposition leader, so I shouldn't worry about this. Why should this be something that impacts all of us?
Because Belarusians who started their revolution last fall, they were fighting for Western values. They were fighting for democracy, for freedom, for free and fair elections. They were fighting for human rights. And right now, when Belarusians in need, they're really expecting that the Western world will be supporting them. Just 30 minutes ago, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya conducted the call with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan of the United States, and they discussed how the U.S. can help Belarusians. Before that, 2 hours ago, there was a call with Josep Borrell. And I feel confident because we see and we hear the words of support, but sometimes words are not enough. We need real actions. And Belarusians need to understand that they're not alone in their fight for freedom and democracy.